Really happy to see you all for this webinar. We are on live on YouTube as well as on Twitch. I guess we are, if I look at the numbers, about between 10 and 15 people watching this the live stream on YouTube at the moment. I'm expecting to have more people during the event. So for tonight, I'm going to give you a little intro about what the WebMardi is all about. Then Christian is going to give his talk. We're going to have a Q&A session at the end of the talk. So if you have any question you want to ask Christian, just write them down in the YouTube chat, and Camille will process them at the end of the talk and share them with Christian. And then we're going to announce the next WebMardi. So the WebMardi is basically an association that runs meetup all around Romandie, basically the west side of Switzerland. We are talking about coding, design, sharing experience about what we found and that could be interesting to share to other people. We meet all first Tuesday of each month for 45-minute talks. And we've been doing this since 2009. The association is run by Camille, Nelson, Kevin, and myself, with the help of Leap and Antistatic. Those are our main sponsors. And we are as well partners of JetBrains. Maybe you know that companies are doing code editors. And Smashing Magazine, which is a website where you can find a lot of blog posts about the web. And they also do events and conferences over the year. Okay, before we start, just a little story about how Christian happens to do his talk tonight. I had a really interesting discussion with Christian, I guess it was like 3 years ago or 2 years ago during a Leap party. And we were discussing about cyberpunk and running websites and everything interesting all around those questions. And then a little bit later, I asked Christian whether he would be interested in giving a talk to the WebMardi. He said that he was really motivated. And this year, we plan having him in March. Unfortunately, due to the COVID-19, we couldn't do the talk. So we had to, unfortunately, to cancel it. And in the end, we could make it for tonight. We had like a speaker plan, and unfortunately he couldn't be giving the talk tonight. And Christian was here to help and was eager to come and present his subject. So I won't talk much more, and I will let Christian present his talk.
Thank you very much for the introduction. So let's dive right in. High-frequency web pages, the learnings from running a huge website. An alternative title for today would be How Not to Go Insane, or even more, yeah, that way. So I'm Christian Riesen. I'm a senior developer at leap.ch. I also the creator of Rocka. I've been doing this stuff for a little bit over 20 years. My main part that I'm doing today is PHP applications with a little bit of JavaScript, HTML, and some CSS on the side thrown in. And as usual, I like to add something completely irrelevant to the talk about myself and that is I can hit an orange at 30 meters with a recurve bow. That is completely useless for this entire talk, so we can forget about it again. So first, I'm going to talk a little bit about the how, like what were the problems that I encountered, what were the solutions that I implemented, and what were the effects observed of that. What exactly this is that I'm talking about, the exact page that I'm talking about, we'll talk about that at the very end because it's completely irrelevant to what I'm saying today. So just temper your expectations. We'll talk about exactly what's going on. Another way to talk about this is how to get a really slow website that somewhat works with millions of users of visiting. The page in question was visited by over 2.5 million people a day. Each of them created somewhere between 10 and 15 page views. That's quite a lot. It's been a while ago as well, so even for today it's a lot, but back then it was even more so a lot. So I'm going to tackle this a little bit the weird way by showing you what to do, or rather what not to do. So first, saturate your connection. This was run on a complete dedicated connection, like the servers were behind our own line. So if you run it on your own connection and you completely saturate it with traffic, your requests that happen from users are queuing up on the server, the CPU spikes, memory spikes, everything just throws up and stops working pretty much. You can throw more hardware at it, but it's just delaying the inevitable. If you have 10 connections per second and you can only handle 8, then it handles those 8. 2 left over, another 10 come in, you have 12 to handle, 4 wait, and that just keeps on rising until the server just gives up or just drops connections, which isn't fun either. So first thing we did was get rid of everything. All the images, all CSS, all JavaScript, everything that was not necessarily coming from the server had to go from the page. For that, we used what we could today call a CDN. It was servers all over the world. All those files were just stored on those servers. Then where there were more users for the page, there were more servers. And then there was some magic happening internally by detecting from where they're coming from. It would replace the actual URLs on the page for those things, for the images, for the CSS and all that. All of that was some internal magic. It worked surprisingly well. But did it help? Well, a little. More users could see the site now, but the sites would still slow down. It just would allow more users to come in and then saturate the connection again. Hardware was still completely overloaded, didn't work really well. So, well, let's go on. Second step, dynamically render everything. So every single request had to do some checks while it was rendering. For example, is that user logged in? Is it an admin? If it's an admin, they see different controls on the page directly to make it very easily to work with it. So all of those things happen on the run. It does database queries and all sorts of things. That was just very slow. So what can we do? First, we split out the admin portion. So it was basically a copy of the page that had everything intact, and it was just copied, and it was a secret URL, and there was a login, so nobody could get into it otherwise. And the public side had all the admin material and all the checks removed, so there wasn't a dynamic rendering of every single page all the time. Did it help? The admins were happy. They suddenly could use the site without having all the queuing happen to them all over the place because the hardware wasn't overloaded. For the users, no. Nobody really saw a change from it, and that took a lot of time. Happy admins, not so happy users. So how can we make the page even worse? Render all data live. So again, each request makes database accesses. If you have something like a list or a search, that's even worse. You have quite a lot of access that you use. Then take all the page data, render it together, and then re-render the thing again when the next person comes, and re-render it again when the next person comes, and create a database again when the next person comes. Fantastic. To make this really, really quick and easy, because we still had some dynamic elements that needed to be changed on the fly, like the CDN stuff, went with a pre-render. So when a content changed, there was a pre-render of that page into a static template file. Then from that template file, it could just replace CDN location. If you're familiar with PHP's str replace function, you can give it two arrays, and then it takes the first element from the first array and the first element from second array, and it replaces those. And if you run that with two completely filled array once, it is blazingly fast. It's probably the fastest thing you can do. So that worked really, really well for us in that regard. There was a background task that checked for old pre-renders and rebuilt them. Usually it was just on admin changes when the rebuild happened, but sometimes even for the admin, there was a timeout or something, and then the rebuild didn't happen because it wasn't the same process. So something to clean up was absolutely necessary, and that took care of pretty much everything else. Very dynamic pages such as lists. I mean, you could sort them and then you add them, and then all the lists are different again, and all the searches, they were completely excluded from that. But the individual snippets, so if you have a list and you have a list entry, or you have a search and you have a search entry, those individual ones were pre-rendered and available to just grab. And if the title changed, then those snippets would change along with it. Sorry. Did it help? Yes, the database was happy. It was just around the time when I built a new database server, actually, and I was a little bit disappointed because this blazingly fast new database server suddenly was pretty much useless. It was fast, but now it was even faster because the database didn't have to do so much anymore. So it did a lot of load reduction on the web server. Also, I think also because of the MySQL, we use MySQL because the MySQL queries were a lot less. And the overall output of what we could do, like the request per minutes we could actually handle, went up by about 50%. This led to a lot of caching stuff and so on, and then dealing with that, but it still helped a lot. I mean, if you think about it and think, hey, this is a really bad idea. Yes, it is. But that's what was needed in this case. Then step 4, to really make your page, the worst you can do is add a search to it. So the search, to make it really slow, you make a like query over a database. You search for a specific string in the database with a like query. It's one of the worst things you can do. Don't cache anything, don't track anything. And if it's something bad you can do, just do it. Like no indexes or anything like that. That's really, really, really slow on your page. So our solution was to offload to an indexing engine. What we used it wasn't Lucene, but it was something very similar to it. We just feed it documents, and then when we have inputs from searches, we normalize them. So if you send a string, we just make it all lowercase and things like this. And then we do the search against the engine, and the engine just returns the ID. So it just gives the ID of the article, for example, that we're looking for. And then we look at that in the database and then return it. We also did some query caching with the result IDs. So if you were searching for a term, then we cached those IDs that were returned on the first page. That also reduced a lot because some of the queries were just thousands of times per hour, and it just meant the caching engine, the indexing engine could actually bring out new content instead of having to deal with those caches as well. And then, of course, we have to show the pre-rendered snippets from the IDs. So there's even not much to do in PHP anymore. Just grab that cached snippet and you're done. A big thing that we did in this regard also was tracking the searches. We were then tracking which queries were used. So we tracked the normalized queries. So if someone searches for a boat with a big B and someone searches for a boat with a small b, that will be the exact same query, because in the end that delivers the same result. We tracked how many times was the query used, how many results did the query return, and we tracked that per day. And then it was aggregated on a per month and a per year basis. to improve the search results, which helped a lot, was we looked at the 0 results queries that were used the most. So like the top 10 searched queries that returned 0 results. We also looked at the top 10 most searched queries to see if they return what we expect. And we also tracked if we looked at them and optimized them. So if we saw on one day, boat was the major thing that everyone was looking for, and they found lots of articles for it. We were searching for it, looked like, yeah, it looks like those are all boat things. And then we marked it, and then it wouldn't show up. It would show up as has been looked at in the last 7 days. And we would not have to look at it for another 7 days, and through that optimize our search. And we also added then hidden keyword fields that are nowhere on the page. But then if someone searches for boat and they were expecting something to find that talks about ships, then we could just add the word boat to that hidden keyword fields, and it's fine. So you could easily find those things, and it would actually make the search results much, much better, much, much quicker. Also, there's lots of things with 3-letter acronyms. Searching for something with just 3 letters or something, and then you would expect it to show up, or things with a dash or without a dash, and so on. Those things were all put in there, and then we could increase the helpfulness of our search extremely. And that was really only possible with the indexing engine, because if we didn't have that, making like queries over multiple fields would have been absolutely disastrous. Did it help? Yeah, for the search, the database was much happier on top of it. The results were extremely quick. The results were more meaningful because we could add things like the keywords into it. The overall user experience was just extremely better for them, and it used a lot less resources overall. So we got a pretty good page boost out of it, but it was hard to gauge how much it was exactly. I would probably say about at least 10% from what it was from the beginning. Step 5, add advertisements. If you have a page that has nothing to sell but is just a content output, as this page was, then you have ads on it. So place ads by countries, track the ads, make reporting over the placement and over the views and clicks of the ads. All of that, absolutely wonderful. Makes your page so wonderfully slow. So if you have to do it, then yeah, it helps if you use the same magic as with a CDN. So we restricted things based on IPs where you're coming from. We use existing statistics that were already running anyway. For example, Google Analytics that gave us really good reports. Just to estimate views and then give it to advertisers and say, hey, if you book it for a month, that's how much you get, roughly. We can't guarantee it, but that's about it. Also, not counting the clicks on our side made sure that we didn't have something slowing down the system even more. And then we could just link to something the customer wanted, and then that meant they tracked on their side, which is much, much better these days as well. So did it help? Well, the end user really didn't feel too much from it. It added more talking to the customers and explaining to them and making the stats and so on. But overall, the system kept really chugging along as it should have been, and we didn't have any slowdowns from this anymore. And so the end user didn't really notice, but it helped. It helped definitely. And then the 6th step, add customization. So custom feeds of different topics, make articles as favorites, track the grouping of interests, add comments. Yeah, that'll do it. That'll make your page instantly really, really slow. It's just fantastic. Yeah. So this is the point where it sort of broke our system pretty much. That's where I had to go really deep into it and completely rewrite a lot of the things to make it even halfway work. So the whole page was set up to be progressively enhanced. The page itself was pretty much identical for everyone when it loaded, and then JavaScript and some API calls then changed it to what they needed. For example, there is a there is a user part where it says like, here, this is you, and then it loads the comments in, and you have the JavaScript to post a comment and all that. That loaded in after the fact. So all JavaScript, all the things that were customized for use of JavaScript, and that made a huge difference in the regular loads, because you could just instantly see the page and already interact with it, and then the rest started trickling in as load permitted, or they already had some caching locally for that. There was lots of invalidation of caching going on in there as well, and then rendering the pages when the content changed, and so you pray that nobody figures out what you're doing, because that usually ends up badly. Did it help? Not really, but I think it hurt less because of that. The whole process of making that was very time intensive. We had spikes in database queries, and there we used some memory caches, which helped. But still, it added more load instead of taking away. But I think we have been able to dampen the effect as much as was possible. A lot of the problems were then to figure out what was a stale and what was not stale content, what was able to cache, what was not able to cache, and then making that reliable enough so people don't just see errors or empty pages or very, very outdated pages. What did help though was the fake instant responses. So if you posted a comment, you clicked, boom, the comment was already there on the page. That was just, it was updated on the page by JavaScript before they even sent it out. So if someone just posted a comment and immediately closed the browser, then the comment would be lost. And most of the time people wouldn't notice. The feature was also in beta. There wasn't that many people who used it. So I think I skirted that issue with that. Of course, today you would have something when you would do that, it would pop up a little box and say, hey, there's things that is not saved yet. Are you sure you want to go away with this or not? And have some spinner or something. We didn't do that. It's just click, done. Everyone felt it was really quick and really instant, even though it did nothing yet. Then sometimes it didn't work. So here we come to a slight interactive portion. Now that you have heard what I talked about this here, how about you try to guess the year? Like when was this built? When do you think this web page was built and all these problems cropped up? I hope you can post something in the chat. I can see the live chat from YouTube. Maybe someone can guess what that year must be. As you can guess, it is a bit older. So am I. But it's been a while. Yep, I'm aware of the delay. Well, so far only one person. Nobody want to guess? Feels a little underwhelming there. 2010, 2000, 1995, 2008. Interesting that this is 2008, 2010. I find that very interesting. 2011, maybe one or two more just to see what we are getting here. Yeah, it's been quite a interesting project and quite a challenging project. To do something like this that scales to millions, that took quite a bit of time. So yeah, let's just continue here. So yeah, I guess again we have the guesses of 2010, 2008, 2011. There was some cheating going on there. It's actually 2001. So this page is about almost 20 years now. If you've seen this before, it's a page called Reactor. This is a shot from when it was later up again. It looked a lot worse in 2001, but there's no full picture of that anymore. It started about in the middle of 2001, end of 2001, the line was already saturated, and the whole thing started. It had a lot of metadata links, eDonkey 2000 and Magnet and that, no downloads at all. So if you went to the page, you could see things like movies and games and whatever else. So that explains a little bit the popularity of that. So yeah, it's quite old, and it had to deal with all these things when there wasn't a lot of the technologies that are common and we have now available. PHP wasn't as fast as it is now. Originally it was written in PHP 4. So the fake classes that PHP 4 offered and things like this. It's been a while. It's been a while. So what does that bring us, right, in the end? When you have something that is this gigantic, you have to throw out the rules. You have to come to the understanding that what you know is wrong. Things you've been taught, things you've been told, this is how you do it, this is the right way, this is the pretty way, and so on, are usually wrong. They usually just don't work. So when you are at this large scale, it does not work. It does not play by the rules that you're familiar with. It just doesn't. So your knowledge might not work at insane scales. So how can you tackle it? Well, the first step is usually to keep it as simple as humanly possible. So if you can pre-render, do it. But you should do it proactively only, not on request. If you do it on request, you get into this wonderful thing called a cache storm. Say 3 people access the same thing at the same time. If you have tons and tons of requests, that's a very common thing happening. Then all of them see, oh, it's not there, and all of them try to build it, and the building might be very heavy. Then another 10 come in the same time, and it tries to build the same thing over and over, and it just explodes from there. Not good. You're better off in situations like that you just say, okay, the first one builds and the other one get an error. They might just reload and it might then be built instead of just trying to handle all of them and then your system goes away. We used file caches for this, again, 2001. It worked just fine. There was nothing fancy needed. The operating system itself was Linux. It actually cached quite a lot of things when it was just reading into its own memory, so that helped a lot. There wasn't that many writes into the caches, but more reads, so that was perfectly fine. Of course, it meant I couldn't use multiple servers in that regard, and it would still do all the caches. Later, we had 2 servers, and those 2 servers that handled the web part, and those 2 servers were just told by the admin interface, both of them, hey, delete those files. Then memory caches are good. But memory caches can fail. At that point, memcached was already out and available. It was fine, but it was also a additional thing that was running, like, for example, the search indexing thing. It was another software was running, and it had to connect to it, and had to talk to it, and then it come back and do something with the response. And that was also true with memcached. And so if it can fail, it might also not work as well, especially if you're talking tons and tons of hits per second. I think the most hits we had per second was something around 5,000, 5,500 or something like that. It was just insane. And yes, there were pretty big machines. Both of them were dual socket machines back then, and lots of RAM. Like everything was full. Database. Yeah, the database is always slow searching. So if you can use indexing engines, for example, today I'm using Elasticsearch on a daily basis. It's pretty much one of the best things you can use in this regard. There might be other things that work better for your use cases, or you can go simpler. There's lots of good stuff you can do with Postgres these days. You can use Lucene directly, and there's a couple other ones that do similar things. There's lots of cloud openings that you can use as a service. Amazon, there's lots of it. There's also other ones. If you can use it, do it, but also keep in mind it can fail. So what happens if it fails? It's usually better to fail onto a error state than to retry or something like that. And of course, if you can cache it, that's even better. Monitoring all the things, tracking all the things is really, really good. We were tracking, we had everything like double in the end. We had 2 DNS servers, we had 2 monitoring servers, and the monitoring servers were all both monitoring the same things at the same time. And we had temperatures, for example, which actually on one server saved us. Like there was at the main web server at the beginning, one of the CPUs, the cooler on the CPU sort of got loose a little bit, and so it was constantly overheating and then throttling and go back down again. And from the vibrations from everything, I mean, back then they were even worse than they are today. It was just getting worse and worse and worse, and it might even have broken the CPU at one point. So thanks to the temperature monitoring, I saw that and I just removed it. And when I was removing it, basically fell off as I was trying to remove it. And we're like, oh yeah, that's probably a problem. So things like this is very, very important to do, and not just how many hits do you have or something like that. Also memory consumptions, IOs on file systems. All of these things suddenly play a role where you usually think, can someone access the page? Yes, good, done. There's a lot to do when you're going in, when you have something of this scale. Knowing the internals of server software is really good. We initially used Apache, which was terrible for this because every single request loaded an entire Apache instance, an entire PHP instance, filled up the RAM, filled up the CPU with time it required, and it just didn't work that well. There was an update, and we could switch to another module of Apache that really worked really well. There was PHP updates that helped. We tried a lot with, there was some compilers you could do back then that said it was faster, and none of them ever did. There was some you could buy, but they were very expensive, and they didn't seem to be doing much either. But yeah, there's always knowing the software that it runs on. That is very, very helpful. That makes a huge difference in that space, especially when you're in that space. And if you have saturated connection, it's a pain to deal with. You're trying to have all the customers come into your shop, but your door is only this small. Yeah, you can still get in, but you're not getting as many people in as if you were a few meters wide, right? I think that was the thing that nearly drove me insane over the years that this ran. A big part there is also database denormalization. I mean, everyone says, don't do it. Always normalize it. You have a city, you have it once in a database, and then you have an ID for the city, and then you use the ID everywhere else where you use the city. Yes, for most things, but that just doesn't work on a scale of this proportion. So when you have something that is huge, challenge everything that you have as basic wisdom, and especially on database and data retention things. So do you need to have an atomic level consistency for this thing? Or is it good enough if it's eventually consistent? For example, you make a change, you make a change in your email draft. Is it okay if it's synced to your phone from your laptop a few seconds later or a minute later and doesn't have to be instantly there? Probably. When you change a value on a bank account, that you probably want to have instantly saved somewhere in some form or fashion. But even there, banks usually run a lot of actually eventual consistency levels, which I find very interesting myself. So learn from those things if you can use it, and if you ever have something that is this insanely active. And of course, CDNs, use them. What we had back then was actually individual people who volunteered server space. So we had one was a web uploader, other was FTP, another one just was able to go over the console, and you had to pull it from somewhere else into it. It was hilarious what we had back then, and tons of different things. Someone had own domains, other had subdomains, others were like a subdirectory somewhere. It worked. It worked really well because we didn't have to do many updates on those files, but it did. But today, I mean, if you have images, use Rocka. Shameless self-promotion. It's basically what Rocka is, and what the images part is the pains that I had from back there I have solved the problem multiple times through my career, and today Rocka is what that solution is, where you can save the images and then you can send them out over the CDN in the formats you want without any issues with that. If you have general requests, you can actually use for free Cloudflare. I have an article on my blog, I'm pretty sure it's still there, where you can actually use Cloudflare and GitHub and some Travis CI to make a complete static web page and some Amazon stuff, which is basically costs you $0 today, and it's blazingly fast with Cloudflare support on it. It's absolutely fantastic what you can do these days. Also, CloudFront from Amazon is really, really fast. We're using that. So if you have content that is dynamically created from an API, from anything else like that, use it on a server and only send it from your server that does calculations, something a Node app or a PHP app or something. Only send that from your actual server that does the calculation, instead of abusing it also to send out CSS files. It just makes absolutely no sense to do it that. So let's come to the progression. This is my way of trying to a little bit on a higher level convey how this works. You might have heard a thing like this before in other contexts, but this is basically how it works. So at first you make a bicycle. You have the transportation need, right, from A to B. So how do you get there? Bicycle. You make a bicycle, you have two wheels, you have handlebars, you have brakes. So you can steer at a okay pace, but you can get there. You want to go there faster. You want to also carry more stuff with you. Okay, let's build a car. Still has wheels, and a 4. You have all the metal around you. You have the combustion engine. You have thousands of parts in there. You have gear shifting and auto brakes, and you have the whole electrical system to deal with and everything. So now you build a car. Building a car is a lot different than building a bike. I could probably build a bike in my workshop downstairs. I could not build a car in my workshop downstairs for sure. I would need a different workshop to do this. So you need different tools. You need different facilities even to do that. So you want to build a car, you already go a lot of different places. So if you build a small WordPress page, that's a different thing than if you build an e-commerce page. Already a step up and already a different way of thinking about it. You want to go faster? Okay, let's make a plane. Again, it does have wheels, which are not shown right now. It goes a lot faster. You get faster from A to B. You can even take more people with you than maybe in a car. But there's already quite a lot of different things. You need different fuel. You have to deal with the third dimension, and you have a lot more things to worry about all around it, like aviation, licenses, and training, and all sorts of things. It's a completely different thing that you have to do right here, right? So you want to go in faster, and then we get to a rocket. Yeah, you go really fast. There's no more wheels. They're gone. The steering is pretty much automatic by now. It's essentially a huge bomb that goes off in one direction and sends you flying. That has nothing to do anymore with the vehicle that we were starting out with. This can deliver a lot more than the plane can, than the car can, than the bicycle can. But still, this is a completely different thing. I wouldn't even know how to start making a rocket. So again, completely different thing. And the rocket is where you're landing if you do something like Reactor. So when you're looking at this, you might think like, oh, sure, I can make a WordPress page, and then I can learn how to make something huge with tons and tons of people. No, that doesn't work at all. You have the steps in between for a reason. You have to learn how to handle quite a lot of things first. It makes sense to go through the steps, because a page of these gigantic proportions is something completely different. Oh, right. It's a completely different beast. Large size always behave vastly different than what you might be familiar with. And the larger they get, the worse it becomes. On a project I'm on right now, it's also pretty big. It also has quite a lot of traffic seeing on it. We ran into issues with IOPS operations per second on the file system level that was running Elasticsearch underneath it. So we just got weird responses from Elasticsearch and erratic behavior, and then it took us quite a while to dig out to find that one thing. In other cases, when you just have something small, you go like, okay, it just works because you never get to the to that threshold. Other things we have is thresholds where you have a limit for an index, for example, and the index is what you have in the index is large enough to fit into memory, and then suddenly you have a little bit more, and then you go over that, and you suddenly have no longer everything in memory, but it has to go to the hard drive to read parts of the index, and everything just tanks, and you don't know why. Like nothing changed. Just maybe someone added a new article or two, and boom, everything is suddenly slow. And when you have something like that, then suddenly a lot of the bad ideas about things like you should never do this, they suddenly become good solutions. I'm not saying that all bad ideas become good solutions, but some of them. What you end up doing is you experiment, you try out things that you just randomly think of. You fling things against the wall and see if they stick, because nobody will tell you. Nobody will come and tell you, hey, yeah, do this. I was actually talking to people that ran quite a lot of big pages as well at that point. Was quite familiar with them, and a lot of them said, hey, can you pay me 10,000 and I can consult for an hour for you, and things like this. So nobody will really tell you, and if you don't have something like that available to you, then yeah, you have to find it for yourself, because that's the only way you can get to it. And then of course measure. Always measure, because if you do something and it makes it worse and you don't know because you don't measure, then yeah, then you're just running blindly into the forest, and trees are there, you're going to hit them. And most important of all, of course, don't panic. So yeah, that was it from me. Thank you very much for listening. I hope you enjoyed the talk. And then I guess we can go to the questions. Are there any? Okay.
Yes, we have some questions. I'll be looking at the chat. At the moment, we don't have any questions in the chat, but I do have some questions. It's a question about, as of today, we see that we have the possibility at the moment to use static site generators. What do you think of them?
For example, the Rocker IO page is statically generated. I have quite a few other personal pages that are statically generated. If you can statically generate, I would do it. I mean, it's the fastest thing you can do. It's the most secure thing you can do. If there's nothing that can react, that can be hacked into, manipulated, or something, perfect. Nothing you can do is more secure and faster than a static page. It's just pretty straightforward.
Yeah. Okay. And did you already struggle building things with static site generators, or did you encounter any issues by using those tools?
Yeah, some of them are not very straightforward to learn. It's a little bit of a documentation problem most of the time. It's also there's so many different ones, and you don't understand which one is the right one for you. And it's really it comes down to what do you need, and then what expertise do you have. For example, I've seen, I forgot what the name of it was, a React-based one. So if you do a lot of React already, that might be the one for you. For me, I use one that's called Sculpin. It's PHP based, and it's actually also based a lot on Symfony components. And my work is mostly doing Symfony PHP stuff, so that was very straightforward for me. So I could understand what was going on in there and even hack it and even expanded it as I needed to. The great thing about it for me was that I could get it so I can automatically run it from GitHub. So one of the pages that I have is just completely open, public on GitHub. And when I push something to it, it will automatically kick on Travis CI. It will build it because you can do the secret storage with GitHub. So it can have a token to upload it to Amazon S3, which is a static file hosting then. And then that is cached again by Cloudflare. Perfect. All I do is have markdown files that I put together, save, commit, push, and then it's just doing everything on its own.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for that answer. I think what you said about choosing the tools that you know at least that you know the technology as like something that is the key if you want to improve or to debug if you encounter any issue. I think that's a really good point when evaluating any of those tools.
It's really the most important part is it the right tool for it? For example, Jackal is extremely good. We also use Jackal for another thing with one of our customers. I have no idea how to do this thing. I'm completely lost with that thing. I am able to make it work and to add content to it, but I never had the time and also never the incentive to actually go deeper into it. I'm sure it's perfect and can do everything that we need to do, and it probably can do a lot more than I'm aware of, and probably lots of plugins and whatever else, because it is one of the most common available one.
Yeah.
But for my use, it was just, I don't understand this thing. So my tool using Sculpin was the right thing to do. It's very depending on your task, less so on the technological thing. That's more like the secondary thing than to make it possible for you to understand it if there's something goes wrong. And it did.
Okay, yeah, makes sense. Another question, what about images? How can you improve the performance of pictures on your website?
Okay, images.
What would be your recommendation, basically?
Okay, the simple recommendation is use Rocker. The thing is, no, there's a reason for it. I don't want to push it too much, but I want to actually explain what's going on there. One of the issues that you have is that you make a page, you upload, you cut the images to the right size, you upload it, 2 years later want to change it, and then you realize, oh, I need the original image. Where's the original image? Oh, I need to find that, or no, I don't have it. So you take that, you cut it maybe a little bit differently, or you upscale it and it looks crappy. There's so much going on there all the time. And there is also, it's slower, but there's also a lot happening with image optimization all the time. That in itself is like security, its own little niche of IT to just keep up with that. So to have that expertise is just not worth it, right? For most people. So what Rocker does is you take your original image in as big a resolution as you can give, upload it to Rocker, and then you define something and say like, okay, so I want it square and I want it this size and whatever, and then Rocker will resize it, will cut it, whatever you decide, and then it will also deliver it. But when it's delivering it, it will also optimize it. It will do all the optimization, all the little things, the quantizing of PNGs, the recompression, like trying multiple compressions to see which one is the ideal one to make it as small as possible. Choosing the right quality level to make it look really good, but not visually distinguishable from the original. And all those things, there is so much in there. if you want to do it, please go ahead. There's lots of things you can do. There's lots of the tools like image optim, which has PNG and JPEG and WebP modules. WebP itself, it's a new format. Lots of people are not even aware that exists. So all of that is in there, and then also what can you actually deliver, right? So for example, Apple just announced recently that they are also now allowing that they're also are able to read WebP, which they weren't for a long time. So the server, when you use Rocka in this instance, Rocka will detect can you use WebP or not, because the WebP image is usually a lot smaller, so you get a lot faster for the same quality. It's all those things that are together, right? That's all those things that you would have to build, that you would have to know, that you would have to keep on top of. And that was what I had to do with Reactor. I had to do all those things. And I got sick and tired of it because I wanted to build other systems and not do the image stuff. So I actually built the system to take care of that for me. And then it kept on going and going, and today it's Rocka.
Okay. Thank you for your answer. Coming back to what happened in 2003, what tools did you use to monitor Reactor?
What didn't I? The original one was Nagios. That was like the very base level of it to have all the checks with all the plugins, all the services all running, sending me. Back then, you couldn't even send SMS from it unless you paid tons and tons of money, which I didn't have. There was all these little small scripts that are then tried to wrap into a plugin for Nagios to actually give me the information, and then additional things like what was it called, Cacti, I think, or something like that, which is for graphing essentially to get all the data in, especially for the temperature. That was extremely helpful. RRD tool was also one of them that then made pretty graphs for it. We a lot of stuff we also saved into MySQL databases, like all the search stuff was done in MySQL. It was also done in an asynchronous way, so when the user already got the response, only then it saves those. So if that process died, whatever, we lost one entry of what someone was searching for that didn't matter with millions of hits. So it was always a little bit, again, what was the right tool for the right job and what did we have available. MySQL, for example, with the search tracking was used because it was atomic. It allowed me to say, insert this, and if it already exists with this, update it, add +1. And it also updated the search result. So if in the morning there was a search for boat and there was no results, but during the day someone added something with it, and in the end of the day there was a search with boat and there was suddenly one hit, then we would have in the tracking one hit. So we wouldn't have to go and say like, oh, we have no hits for this. So we would see really the ones that were at the end of the day still say like, still there's nothing there. Those ones were the ones we were looking for first, and not the ones where something was found. So it was always what was the tool that we could use that just fit. I'm trying to think. There was one or two other things that we used, but that's a long time ago.
Okay. Another question. It also happens today with a lot of huge websites. They do have sometimes, they are facing DOS, denial of service attack. Have you ever faced any of those attacks? And if yes, what did you do and what would you recommend doing today?
What we had was, I mean, we pretty much, I mean, it was basically constant. There was basically constantly going something on. I had a firewall in front of it, which was just a dedicated Linux machine that just did all the filtering, and there was just tons of filtering in there. That list, I think I was in that configuration at least once a day, to add things to the list, sometimes by hand, sometimes from lists from others. It was just a constant struggle on that front. Most of it was just like general stuff like ICMP attacks and things like this. DDoS was a lot less at that point in time. It still happened, but most of the time the page was so slow that nobody really noticed anyway. And the server just couldn't react. It just the connection went like, "Oh, you want something? No, buy." That was it. And then someone didn't get a reply, and most of the time it was the people who flooded. So it was basically the whole thing was living under constant DDoS anyway, just from the users. And anyone who tried on top of it just made it slower for a little bit, but it never went down because it just couldn't, because it just could reply and reply and reply to the people that wanted something. It was never enough that one single user could have enough clouds to actually bring it down, and that was much more common back then. It was mostly smaller clusters of users doing DDoS attacks. So you had like 100 IP addresses that doing it instead of a million now. So that was much easier to mitigate. Today you have actually really good services like from Cloudflare. I can only recommend them if you have something like this, where you can just put them in front of it and they just shut it down really quick.
Okay, so basically today, if you ever face any DDoS attack using CDNs or Cloudflare can help to solve that issue. Okay, thanks. The next question is more about Reactor itself, this adventure. How did you get into this, and how many people were working on that website? Because it seems so huge.
So I got into it basically by accident because I ran a gaming network, like gaming information network, and because I was doing that and I was programming stuff and doing funny things, and people are like, "Hey, I have this idea," and it spiraled out of control from there, quite literally. I mean, it took 2 weeks for Reactor, or the first version of Reactor, to produce more traffic than all the gaming stuff I was doing at the time. And then after about a month, it was like 10 times more. It's just completely insane. I think near the end, it was about 150 people were working on it. About 30 of them were administrators, which were the people who were adding content to the page. If you want to compare it, it's not like the Pirate Bay where everyone just uploads stuff and it's just everything there. It was very curated. So they would find things, or people could suggest things, they could send in things, and then administrators could pick through that and see like, oh yeah, that's something I want to do on there. And then they would prepare a release saying, okay, this is the movie X, and put a picture to it and description, link to IMDb, and put the links in there and everything. So those were like about 30 people at the end, and the rest of them were pretty much people who just hang out on the forum, moderators in, I don't know how many languages anymore it was at the end, and they had different sections and requests and lists and all sorts of things. It was a huge forum. I was so happy that I had someone who was basically taking care of the forum, and I was basically just a moderately active participant in the forums in the end. Okay, yeah, that's a lot of people then to handle that website. Coming back to the servers, where did you host it? Where were those servers located, and did you build those servers by yourself? They were located about 4 meters below my ass when I was sleeping. It was literally in my house, in the cellar. I actually renovated that room because there was like an old workshop before, and there was like damage from mice and other things. And I put in a connection that was, back then it was 2 megabits. Oh. Up and down in the year 2000. That was gigantic back then. So that was the line. Everything was running on that line. There was millions of people who were going through 2 megabits back then. But then again, there wasn't that many images, and so it was and so the HTML also was compressed and everything. It was as much as it could do. So that was where it was. The servers were all hand built. the first web server was a old gaming machine of mine. I already had 4 servers running from the gaming stuff that I was having. So that was already there. In the end, I think it was like 12 to 15 servers.
Wow.
So there was 2 DNS servers, there were 2 monitoring servers. There was the main database server. There were 2 web servers. There was the firewall. There were again there were 2 web servers. Then there was another project that was pretty famous. It was called Jiggle, which was a search engine that just searched the entire network. Especially back then it was eDonkey 2000, but it was also expandable. So and if you found something on Jiggle and it was already on Reactor, it would flag it. So it would show in the search engine, hey, by the way, this is Reactor thing, and link to Reactor, and so people could say, oh, someone already said this is a good link or something. That was also, I think, 1 server or 2 server in the end. There was a file server, a backup server. There was a dedicated mail server. I'm probably forgetting a couple other ones as well. There's at least a couple ones are still for the gaming stuff. That was still running, but they were not too happy either. But it didn't affect them too much because it wasn't that frequented. But still, it would slow down most of the things. Oh yeah, and we had 2 IRC servers. Yeah.
Wow, and all that in your basement.
Yes.
Wow, you had like a data center in your basement. Basically.
Exactly. I had like 2 big fans in there just to move the air around. A couple of those were refurbished from somewhere, like one of the the secondary DNS server, one of the IRC servers was like hardware someone had laying around in their basement that we were throwing out. I was like, does it run? Yes. Okay, good enough. Let's take that, just so it doesn't use CPU on other things that were more needed, right? Yeah, it looked like a junkyard more than anything else. Don't think server racks and nice and everything, but just cables string all over the place. I put on some nice labels and I gave them pretty names, and that was it. That was the maximum that I did. But yeah, it was a constant struggle on that front as well.
That's impressive. Next question: what was the language you were using to build Reactor back then?
The main language was PHP. It was PHP 4 at the beginning, so we used those fake classes that PHP had at that point in time. It was class-based. It was actually quite modern built. It had its own little templating engine, which basically stole some ideas from Fast Template was a library back then, and some ideas from Smarty template engine back then, but just made it quicker and simpler for the needs that we had. I built my own sort of database abstraction layer to make it work. Yeah, so there's a lot of things like that in there that just built for myself and used over time. There was some JavaScript in there. There were some tools that then ran over images and optimized them and things like this. But the overall language that was everything built in was PHP. Even the forum, I think we used 3 different forum softwares over time. All of them were also written in PHP back then.
Okay. So mainly PHP, basically.
Yes.
Next question, and nowadays we have tools like Blackfire IO to improve the codes and to help us build better softwares. What tool or services did you use at the time in 2003?
Well, we could get from Apache, you could get quite a lot of low-level statistics and then feed that into other things. That was one of the things that I fed into the graphing engine from Cocti, which I could see what was going on a large-scale thing. Most of the time, you can only see the large-scale thing. You can only see the mass broiling around. You can't see the individual thing anymore because it just makes no sense. some detailed debugging was pretty much. I think when I've used debugging things, I was mostly just Xdebug that was available back then, but it was a lot worse. Sometimes there was something on like a lower level, sort of like GD2, GDB2, that then you could take some dump file from and then visualize it for PHP, so you know what's going on inside PHP. But that was always just horrible. I only did that when it came down to memory optimizations and things like that. But in the end, it turned out that didn't really help that much either. So a lot of the tools back then, yeah, that's the thing. Tools are fine, but you can't, even if you use the tools, if you're in a situation where this is your life, this is your big thing that you're working on, most of the time it just kicks you in the teeth. Because yeah, you do this, great. As it take off 10 milliseconds, no, screw that, it doesn't matter. It's just go away. It just isn't worth it. You have to be much more careful where you pick your battles than when you pick on your tools. With the tools I had available, it was really tough, and it was not the tools themselves. Like what you have today, like have a tool like Blackfire is amazing. What I had back then and what I had to do just to get something really closely approximating this just took forever, every single time. So you also pick your battles saying like, is it worth it for me to go even into this? So tools like that didn't really help much. Most of the time, really making timings. One of the things that I used quite frequently was using microtime in PHP and take timestamps and measure them and then run it a million times and see how much do I get out of this, and then change something and then run it again a million times and see how much do I get out of it now. That was the tool to use for micro optimizations. But micro optimizations are really only then useful when you spot something that you know is slow. And finding that is then also pretty hard if you don't have the right tools. So be happy there's Blackfire and you weren't around in 2000 doing this thing.
Okay, thank you. I guess we'll close the question. I'd like to thank you a lot, Christian, for sharing your experience, your tips and tricks about how to handle huge websites, and also for everything you shared about this crazy adventure you had building Share Reactor. Thank you very much for your talk.
Thank you very much for having me. It was fun.
Okay, so we'll come back to the WebMardi. The next WebMardi will be on the 4th of August. It's going to be about tackling complex domain strategies and patterns. So if you are interested in design pattern and how you can apply them on your application website, how to improve your code structure so you can better add things on your application, then that talk might interest you. The speaker is going to be Romaric Drigon. He already gave some talks at the SymphonyCon and other events. The event will happen online on YouTube as today. You can already subscribe to the for the event on webmardi.ch. It will redirect you to Meetup, and then you will be able to find the link to the YouTube live. So see you on the 4th of August for that talk. One of our sponsors, Lip, is currently looking for a Django developer in Lausanne. So if ever you know someone, or if you have the skills, if you know Django well, then you can apply online. You can go to lip.ch/jobs, and from there you can apply, and maybe you can join Lip in the future doing Django. You can find all our talks online on YouTube. We will also process that talk to separate the WebMARDI, the introduction to the talk. So we will have the streaming version and only the talk very soon. So just you can subscribe to our channel and to be updated for the new release. And I guess I'll be happy to see you on the 4th of August. And thank you very much for being here and for this really awesome WebMARDI. Bye-bye.